Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And I'd like to start with some good news. We heard from Efren in Puerto Rico.
Again?
Yes.
Again?
He emailed us with more details than just that he is alive.
Does he have? I guess he has power.
He has power. He's fortunate enough to have water running, and he actually said somehow his house managed to get through the ordeal with essentially no damage. So he was very, very fortunate, but he's saying other people that he knows, and certainly many, many other people on the island were not nearly as fortunate as he was. So we're very thankful that Efren made it through that well and relatively unscathed for his property. But of course, thinking about everybody else who's still dealing with much worse circumstances in many cases. So, but thanks to him for updating us. And he's like, yeah, basically hasn't had reliable internet since Irma, so it's been a while for him. It's been tough.
Just think of all the episodes he's going to have to listen to catch up. That's like 75 hours of us.
Well,
it's going to be bad.
Perhaps while things are being cleaned up and that'll be playing in his earphones.
Well, Efren, when you do hear this, or if you do hear this, I will tell you it will not be long after you get power back and water running and everything's back up. It'll be like 2 weeks after people will start complaining on Facebook about kids riding their bikes in the middle of the street. I had to read that about my neighborhood association. Okay. Whenever I hear that, I always think, oh, it must be one of those planned neighborhoods or whatever. No, I just live in a regular neighborhood. They have an association. There's no fees or dues or any of that stuff. It's not deed locked, any of that. I can paint my house purple if I want. And there is a purple house in the neighborhood, so I know that can actually happen. But these people do nothing but complain about kids. That's all they do is complain about children. I'm like, why are you so hateful towards children? I mean, I know they're terrible. I have 3. But you have nothing else to do but complain about children on Facebook?
I guess we'll chalk that up to people being resilient and consider it a good thing.
It's Florida, full of old people who do not like children. They spend enough time with them. All right, I got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. A ton of stuff to talk about. So I want to get right into it. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. It's all one word, and we are very active. This is how Efren let us know he was alive the first time. YouTube.com/c/AVRant, where your question, if it is answered on this podcast, will someday make it over there to be a video of our talking heads and your images if you sent any in on there. Mm-hmm. So check that out. If you want to contact us directly, it's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm tom@avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. I forgot it for a second. It's going to be one of those days. I'm not feeling extremely well, so we're going to power straight through this thing. We do have a producer. His name is Austin. Austin is doing a very extensive, I don't know what we're calling it, a review? We're talking like a setup guide. Tutorial on how to deal with two extensively large subs in a oddly shaped room and how to calibrate them in. So do we have an update on that? How's that going?
I haven't heard an update on that. I'm not sure.
We need to talk to him.
But he's been peppering in little comments on his podcast called We Watch Movies, talking about the bass that he is experiencing while his co-host Cloud goes, huh? I didn't hear any of that. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, apparently.
Right. He does have his own podcast, as Rob mentioned, the We Watch Movies podcast. It is a podcast about the ennui you feel when looking upwards like ennui.
Mm-hmm. I like the word ennui.
It is a great word. It's fun to say. It's impossible to spell without looking it up.
I also very much like the game Ouija.
Where
it's just Luigi from Super Mario Brothers smoking a cigarette and staring pensively off into the distance. It's called Ouija.
Nice. So that is the We Watch Movies podcast. Check that out. It is pedantic but interesting.
And you can reach Austin at Austin Pond on Twitter. Austin spelled with an E-N, not an I-N. Yeah.
And he will also answer the question at avrant.com email if you hit him up there. All right. So, as many of you know, I was sent very kindly. I was sent a receiver from Accessories for Less from Mark, right? Is it Mark?
It was Mark over at Accessories for Less.
Over there at Accessories, who was set up by one of our listeners, Mike, who asked if they would send me something, and they said yes. So they did. They sent me an Denon AVR X4300H, which I got, and he had just emailed me this week and said, how's the receiver working out? I'm like, I haven't set up yet because I have 3 children, and it's like always sports all the time. I just the boys. My son's like kind of on a semi-travel team for soccer, so now it's like our weekends are just. Ugh. 2 of them went away to camp, not to a camp, but to camp with the Boy Scouts. So I only had the small one here and my wife, and they spent the day shopping, and I spent all Saturday tearing down my home theater.
Yep.
I broke apart some of my old 4-inch thick room acoustic panels, made like 1.5 inch thick, ones that are going to sit flush to the wall, so that those things were just so massive they were oppressive in here. I'm going to order special fabric to cover them with. One I found a long time ago on like Reddit or something like that, a big, very, very large image that is all of the different starships, relative sizes to each other.
Gotcha.
I'm going to try to see if I can get that one on one of the panels. I want to get the AVRant logo on one of the panels. Most of the panels are 2x2. I've got one that's 2x2 by 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. I've got one that's 4x2 by 4 inches thick. Got one left like that because it's on a wall that nobody ever gets near.
Okay.
Also moved my surround sound speakers down and forward by about 18 inches down and about a foot forward. So I've got some spackling and painting to do because of that. Very happy with how that worked out. I think it sounds much better. It will also play in better when I get Dolby overhead ones. I'm going to ask SVS if they'll send me some more prime elevation speakers. I haven't done that yet because I haven't gotten around to it. Then I got changed out the projector because Clint sent me a different projector. So now I've got the 6020 UB. Pro Cinema. It's an older projector.
UV? Wow, that's a nice projector, man.
It's very nice.
Yeah, it's not HDR because it didn't quite get up to that. That would be the 6040 UB, which is the pro version of the 5040. But the 6020 was there a 6030? I can't remember. But anyway,
I don't remember.
It's going back to when it was 1080p, not 4K, not HDR, but still an extremely nice projector.
Yes, it's so nice. Okay, so my last projector I had, because it didn't have enough lens shift, I had to turn it upside down on my shelf and like angle it by putting things underneath it.
Oh, the 6020's got lots of lens shift.
Oh, it's awesome. It is so nice. Got that hooked up, then did the receiver. Okay, so the 43, or the 43, what do I have? 43. 4300H. Feels a lot like the 4000.
Sure.
So if you have an X4000, interface feels very much the same. I've done minimal calibration with it. I have not downloaded the Odyssey app yet, but I ran Odyssey just so I could get everything, at least level match. And it told me my front right speaker is out of phase.
Yeah, wired out of phase is what it's telling you.
It's what it's telling me. So I looked at it. It is not. I have not just looked at it once. I have looked at it multiple times. I looked at it twice before this podcast started. I will probably look at it again at least that number of times after the podcast is over, just to verify that I'm not going crazy, because it's saying that it's out of phase. So I ignored it.
Yes, which you can do, by the way. I mean, if you know better than the auto setup, do not be afraid to say, that's okay, ignore that, just proceed. It's okay to do that.
Now, the wires I'm using to run these things are actually completely enclosed. They've been terminated at the factory. So I got them 10 years ago from Belden or somebody. I don't remember who I got it from. Or Blue Jeans, I think. And whatever. Okay, so it says red on one side, red on the other side, white on one side, white on the other side, or with black or whatever it is. And I know the red's on the red and the other one's on the other one, so I know that that's right. So I have not listened to a lot of 2-channel stuff in quite some time.
Okay.
But Hulu is 2-channel. Like,
yes.
No, I can't make it not be 2-channel. It drives me nuts. I can't even use a surround up mixer or something to make it not be 2-channel. It just seems to want to be 2-channel no matter what. And it has never sounded right in here. It's been driving me crazy. So last night, I switched the wires.
Oh, no.
that wire must be the colors must be wrong on it. I've had these wires for 10 years. I have not used probably this wire until I moved into this house because I've got a big stack of them. So whatever ones I've used, I've never run into this problem before because I've got enough wires for a full 7-point setup.
Sure.
But I only ever use 3 because I've always had surround speakers that were wired in wall or something like that, or these wires wouldn't be long enough, so I just use wires.
Right.
I've probably never used this wire before I moved in here. I'm convinced it is out of the wire is wrong.
Oh yeah, that is entirely possible, but
it's either that or there's something wrong with the speaker because once I switched, I was like, it sounds better. It doesn't sound all weird. Like I kept Clint will tell you he was here when I first set it up. It was like we couldn't get the stereo imaging really good.
Yeah,
we got it kind of okay, but it just always sounded like it was kind of a little bit off to one side. And I know what out of phase sounds like, but I was like, look at the wires. The wires are correct.
My goodness.
Now I want everybody who's listening to this podcast to remember. I have been doing this for longer than 10 years. And many people, not just many, most people who are in my position right now would never openly admit that they wired something out of phase and it's been that way for probably about 3 years. Okay? No one would admit that. But I do. And I do because, dude, we're all in the same boat. We all make mistakes, and when we catch them, we catch them. So I believed Odyssey, and then I didn't believe Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then now I believe Odyssey again.
Right.
I am going to switch the wires. I'm going to do a couple other things in here, but man, drove me nuts.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, it was the thing that made you like triple, quadruple, quintuple check because you're like, why is it giving me that error message?
But I never got that error before. That's the thing that's driving me nuts. I never got that error before. I might have switched the wires. I may have at some point in the last couple of years.
Right.
Adjusted some stuff around, turned some stuff around in here.
And
because
never
I did add
Odyssey again on your X4000.
Right, because I've got the I switched in the SVS cables for some of my wires. I may have just switched some stuff around.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the 4300H is very nice. The Odyssey setup went very well. I like the fact that the new ones, they give you like a rocket stand for it.
Yeah, they give you a little cardboard tripod, basically, yeah.
I didn't use it, but it's very nice. My X4000 is now going to go to my friend's house. Now, I bought that one with my own money.
Lucky friend.
I mean, I don't sell stuff, dude. I don't. I did have a listener. I don't think I mentioned this on the podcast because I had mentioned that I had like extra. I have like now 3 projectors in here. They had asked me, hey, so you want to get rid of some of those projectors? First of all, I don't sell stuff. To begin with, I don't sell stuff. Second of all, none of this stuff is mine.
Okay.
Like all of it, some manufacturer could someday go, hey, we sent this guy this thing 5 years ago. We want it back. And I would have to send it back. So when I sell stuff, when I give stuff to my friends that has been in my house for 5 years, I'm like, listen, this is with the caveat. I may call you someday and say, I need it back.
Right.
Just so you know. So my friend's going to go from a Yamaha he bought probably, like 8-10 years ago. He's got HDMI, but it's like really early HDMI to X4000, which is going to have good Odyssey in it, which he desperately needs. So his home theater is... I set it up for him, but he refuses to move his chairs as close so that his surrounds are actually to his sides. They're in front of him. It drives me nuts. The surround sounds are... But we're gonna do what we can. So far the testing is ongoing. As soon as I get some Atmos speakers, I will report on that.
Now, the one pair of prime elevations that you have right now, do you have them set up as front heights?
Front heights. I believe I have them as front heights. And I think they're being used more than they were being used with the neural up mixer.
Yeah,
that was the DTS.
That's been my experience. That certainly the Dolby Surround up mixer makes use of the overhead speakers more than previous up, like Dolby Pro Logic 2Z, for example, that had the height channel.
I automatically went and did the Neural X.
Neural X.
Do you prefer Neural X or the Dolby Surround? Which one do you prefer?
I myself tend to prefer the overall sound of Dolby Surround Upmixer. However,
Yeah.
I use front wide speakers, and Dolby Surround Upmixer doesn't make any sound come out of the front wide speakers at all. So I end up using Neural X, even though to me it doesn't quite have the same nice timbre, and it kind of gooses the overheads and the bass as DTS is wont to do.
Right? Sure. So I watched. Last night was the first night that I had everything really kind of set up and everything in here. I watched Wonder Woman last night, which was great.
Yes.
Sounded great. Sounded fantastic.
Cool.
After I got the audio lip sync stuff fixed, because that always is something you have to adjust. That I was sitting there, I was watching something, and my wife's sitting there right next to me. I'm like, she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Nothing."
Let's not think about it too much.
You're gonna. Okay, I have to fix something. She's like, "Oh, I thought you said you had this thing set up." I'm like, "I did. The receiver had to update for 12 minutes, right? I had to run Odyssey. That was like another 20 minutes of running Odyssey in and out of here and stuff like that. I did a lot of stuff, but you don't see how the sound's coming out after the lips move. You don't see that.
Living with a tech person.
Before. Yeah, it's tough. So, hey, tell us about the Oppo.
Yeah. So Steve on Twitter, he was asking because he's one of the folks who got one of the very first Samsung Ultra HD Blu-ray players, and he's like, "Can you convince me that I actually need an Oppo?" I
would like to spend some money, sir. Help me.
My early thoughts, because I haven't used it a ton, and so keep in mind, I have a television that technically has 4K resolution, but it doesn't have HDCP 2.2. So I can only send it 1080p signals, and it doesn't have HDR of any kind, and it doesn't have wide color. So I'm essentially sending a 1080p signal to the television that I'm using. But my parents do have an LG OLED TV, so that's a full 4K resolution, HDR, HDCP 2.2, and Dolby Vision. So it's got everything. I can test it out fully there. My honest opinion at this early stage is that if you have a really new, really capable TV, like one of the LG OLEDs or one of the upper tier Sonys or upper tier Samsungs for that matter, one of the TVs that has full 4K resolution, does HDR really well, has the wide color gamut and everything. If that's the TV you have, I don't think you need the Oppo. I think you can basically use any Ultra HD Blu-ray player. If you want Dolby Vision, your only other option right now is the LG UP970, which definitely it's much cheaper feeling. The Oppo is really nice. I was impressed just by the packaging that Oppo sent. It's really classy. Everything about it is classy, feels sturdy, all that kind of stuff. But functionally, there's really no reason why you need the Oppo. Where the Oppo is really nice to have is when you have a less capable television like I do, because it provides a whole bunch of settings that other cheaper Ultra HD Blu-ray players don't provide, particularly being able to fine-tune adjust the HDR to SDR conversion. Because out of the box, when it converts an Ultra HD Blu-ray that has HDR10 on it and converts that down to SDR for a non-HDR TV, it tends to look a little dark. Unless you're in a pitch black room, it tends to look dark. But Oppo gives you the ability to adjust that so that you can brighten up the image overall and make the SDR conversion look a little nicer if you have some lights on. It gives you a ton of different settings for your resolution outputs, for your audio settings. So it's certainly an enthusiast model. Everybody knows that going in with Oppo. It's not something I would want to hand to someone who has no idea what any of the tech specs mean, because they might get lost in all the settings that are available. But I actually think it's really worthwhile to have if you have a lesser display. If you have a projector, this is the Ultra HD Blu-ray player that you want, because it gives you the ability to send out the wide color gamut without the HDR metadata. If you have a projector that can do wide color and 4K resolution but doesn't get terribly bright, so HDR looks too dim, you can remove just the HDR but keep the 4K and the wide color gamut, which not all Ultra HD Blu-ray players let you do. So it's got all these excellent settings that I think are most useful for when you have a less than flagship level television. That's the way I'm going to put it. So I don't know what television Steve is using, but for everyone else out there, it's a $550 player. You're certainly spending some coin on it, but it gives you adjustability that other players don't necessarily give you. So that's my thought there.
That's good to know that basically. Well, we always kind of knew that if you have a very good display, it's just about anything you send it, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, because as long as it can get the bits off the disc as they are and get it to your TV, if you got a flagship level TV, there's nothing to worry about. Any player will do that fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. I just saw Efren's email.
There you go.
That's good. I just found it. I have not checked email today. Soccer. All right. Well, that sounds great. There will be. I have a box full of stuff I'm supposed to review in the other room.
Okay.
And I need to do that too. I have a friend who comes over and he saw the box on the counter right before, because it came right before the storm, right before Irma, and he said, "What's in that box?" I said, "I don't know." He goes, "What do you mean you don't know?" I'm like, "I don't know what's in the box." He goes, "What's in the box?"
Yep.
"What's in the box?" I'm like, and my wife is looking at us like we're nuts, and I'm like.
Movies.
She doesn't like horror movies, so there's absolutely no chance she's ever watching Seven, but it was hilarious. All right, let's get into this. Let's go thank our listeners for the week. To start off with, we want to thank Robert. Robert went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. He left us a little PayPal donation over there. Actually, left us 2 little PayPal donations over there. So I think if that was a misclick, I'm sorry, but it's ours now. Now, I don't know how that works. You can probably get a refund.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah. We also want to thank our patrons. We've got 26 now patrons on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon, you go to www.patreon.com/AVRantPodcast. That was our Patreon page, where you can come to AVRant and just click on it from there. Basically, the way that works is it asks you to support us, I guess, on a monthly basis.
Monthly basis, works. Yep.
Every month, it will deduct from whatever account you set it up to a certain amount of money, whatever it is that you want to do. So you now can see pretty much everything we're making now these days. Right. So if you wonder how we're living this lavish lifestyle of luxury and AV equipment, yeah, now know we are 100% transparent. So there it is, and yes, that all goes into an account that I control, and it does get distributed to. Though I haven't distributed anything recently to you guys, but I do occasionally put a bunch of money.
Patreon's only been up there for less than a month, so wasn't expecting anything yet.
We're getting there. So thank you to all of our patrons.
Yeah. Huge thanks to all of our patrons. I'm super excited and impressed by that. So that was totally worthwhile. Thank you.
And if you can support the podcast in another way, please do, and then let us know what you've done. Byron did that. He talked us up to SVS yet again. This time it was due to one of the binding posts on one of his Prime Elevation speakers breaking as he attempted to stop one of his SPAY connectors from wiggling. SVS quickly sent him a replacement terminal block at no charge and always responds to his emails within 30 minutes. So a shout out to Byron for their excellent customer service. So if you're worried about customer service, Byron says SVS is good. And Tony also bought a Denon AVR X4300H, yay! And some Focal Bird speakers from Accessories for Less, and let them know we sent them their way. He also bought dual SVS PC2000 subs and let SVS they were an AVRant recommendation. So thank you, Tony. And thank you, Byron.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Byron. And I wanted to give a shout out to Nathan, who was the fellow who originally contacted Open and was like, hey, you should give one of those guys an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. It was Tom's message to them that actually made it happen, but shout out to Nathan for setting that kind of in motion. So thanks.
Yeah, I didn't even know that happened. So good. All right, so we were talking about doing interviews. Our interview with a rep from Surge X is scheduled for next week on Thursday.
Yeah, that's October the 26th. October 26th. We're planning to do that. So yeah, if you have any questions about power
check my calendar. Is that on my calendar?
What's that?
What time did we say we were going to do that? 9:30?
We haven't nailed down the time yet because I haven't heard back from Pete to make absolutely sure. But it'll be in the morning. It'll be in the morning of October 26th. So yeah, for our listeners, if you have any questions about power protection, that's what Surge X specializes in. So please send those to question@avrant.com, and we'll ask any questions that get sent our way.
That's important.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not on my calendar. Like, if I don't put it on my calendar right now, I'll forget again.
Yeah.
So we're still working on our interviews with someone from RBH, and by working on it, I mean I sent one email and never got a response back. So I was going to send a second email and then didn't. So I will. And I guess Brent Butterworth is still...
I still haven't heard back from James, so So I'll have to ping James again and see what's up with that.
James is probably busy. Didn't he just move? I thought he just moved
Yeah.
not too long ago, right? Yeah, he's probably busy. All right, we already talked about all that and all that. Okay. In the news, Disney partnered up with Google to greatly expand their Movies Anywhere service. Fox, Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal have all come on board, with Lionsgate and Paramount in talks to allow digital movie purchases from Google Play, Amazon Video, iTunes, and Vudu to all work with the Movies Anywhere app. So instead of having to keep track of which movie you bought on which service and having to use the dedicated app for each service, you can use one app to access pretty much all of your online content library. Mm-hmm. I honestly thought this might never happen.
Well, it still isn't all because we don't have all the studios yet. MGM has also not been mentioned. And who else? I think that's the last big one of the studios. But yeah, it isn't everybody yet.
Who made that garbage Mummy movie that just came out? Was that MGM? Was that Universal?
I'm pretty sure that's Universal. Universal is terrible. The monsters. Yeah, I think.
Terrible movie. It's just so bad.
But MGM would be like, say, all the James Bond movies, right? So they aren't there yet.
They're due for a good one. They switch. They're trading up, right? They're getting rid of Craig and getting somebody new. Is that
not for the very next one? The very next one is still Daniel Craig. It's probably his last one.
That's too bad. James Bonds always start off good, and then they just get progressively crappier. Like Pierce Brosnan, the first one was GoldenEye was great. I like the second one though. A lot of people like GoldenEye better than that one. And then they just kind of like
they went
off and got
stupid.
Bad.
They got
bad.
Real bad.
They got yeah. So yeah. All right, Disney was a lone holdout studio that did not support Ultraviolet, and now Movies Anywhere is a true competitor. So
yeah, the other cool thing about this whole Movies Anywhere initiative is that, okay, let's say you bought something on Amazon Video.
Right.
And you now link your Amazon Video account to your Movies Anywhere account.
Okay.
And then let's say you also have a Vudu account. So now you link your Vudu account to your Movies Anywhere account. That movie that you purchased on Amazon Video, if it's from one of the studios that's working with this Movies Anywhere program, will now also show up in your Vudu account. Even though you didn't buy it directly from Vudu, they know that you bought it at Amazon, and now you have the Vudu version as well. So you aren't forced to use the Movies Anywhere app, and that's important if your streaming device at the moment is, say, an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, because those don't have Movies Anywhere apps just yet. They're in the works, but they don't have those apps yet. But you probably have a Vudu app or an Amazon app on your Xbox One or PlayStation 4. So it's this cross-pollination of the libraries, plus the ability to just use the Movies Anywhere app if you're using a device that has that app. So pretty cool. It's a digital locker, as they say. Movies Anywhere itself doesn't sell any movies. You're still going to one of these 4 major services to buy the movie there. But once you buy it one place, you have essentially purchased it in all the places. So that's kind of cool.
I like that.
So
if you want to rent Ultra HD Blu-ray discs, there's a new option for people in the United States. Rent4K.com sends Ultra HD Blu-ray rentals by mail right now. They will only send one disc at a time. Price appears to be around $7 to $8 depending on the title, and multiple disc collections are rented as individual discs. So is it $7 or $8 a title? A
disc.
Time?
A disc.
Okay, whatever.
But, it's a way to rent it.
I guess that's similar pricing to individual rentals at 3dblu-rayrental.com, but 3D Blu-ray Rental also offers subscription plans and all sorts of discs, not just UHD Blu-rays. Yeah. So that's the other option you have out there.
Yeah, because sometimes people are like, if I want to rent a physical disc, how do I do that these days? Because a lot of people don't have access to a physical video rental store, only sort of independent stores. And what are there, like 4 Blockbusters left in all of the U.S. or something crazy?
I'll be honest with you. I am highly, and my wife will kill me if she hears me say this, I am considering getting the discs again from Netflix. Because they still do ship the discs.
Yeah, but Netflix isn't renting Ultra HD Blu-ray discs yet.
I understand that, but I don't have Ultra. I'm just saying in general, I am looking for that, because if you don't miss it if you don't get it as it comes through Redbox, which not everything comes through Redbox,
then it's gone.
It's gone. You got no chance. And I mean, Hulu's been great lately. I've been really enjoying Hulu and some of the content they have, but it's just not enough. I want to be able to just say, hey, remember that movie? I want to see The Cube. Remember that movie, The Cube?
Yep.
where everybody's trapped in the cube and it kills you in all kind of weird
Cube.
ways. I like that movie, and I would like to see it. How do I see it? I don't have any idea how I can see this movie. Not in my home theater.
Rent it on iTunes or Google Play or something.
I'm not doing that. No, I want one of my streaming services to have it. All right, got a couple comments from listeners. Dave says, anyone wants to experience some amazing spine-crushing bass, check out the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack. The track 3 is his personal favorite. Is that it's got also the soundtrack. Okay, what am I thinking?
It's the soundtrack.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Carl shared some articles that cover some of the topics we've been discussing lately, including HDMI 2.1, connecting the new Apple TV 4K, and whether the wobbled single-chip DLP 4K projectors are genuinely 4K resolution or not. So those are 3 different articles. 2 of them are on Sound and Vision, one's on the Home Theater Review. We'll link those up for
there was some useful info there. So over at avrant.com, we post our show notes. We have links to the articles that we talk about or products that we recommend, so you will find that in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah. Byron says that adding another 12-volt trigger splitter work. So last week I said, stop it. Just leave your subwoofers on. Rob said if you wanted to really fix it, you could do this. Byron had already done it by that point.
Yeah.
So he now sends trigger 1 from his Denon receiver to his Emotiva amp, and that amp feeds a 1-in, 2-out splitter, which in turn feeds 2 more 1-in, 2-out splitters, and those 4 outputs are then feed his 4 subs, so he's got no more humming issues.
Yeah.
He measured roughly 8 watts being drawn with the subwoofers always on, but just sitting idle. Using the triggers to put them into standby, dropped the current draw down to under a watt, so it's not for nothing. I think he said it was about $40 a year he was saving.
About $40 a year, which means pretty expensive electricity wherever he is.
It is what it is, and I'm sure that, whatever, but I don't know. I'm not doing it. I'm going to pay the $40 a year. Anyways, he says that his theater room is coming along nicely in general, and he especially loves the extendable TV mount that we suggested a while back. So I guess there's a picture of that up there.
Yep.
Looks like he's got his 2 subs real close.
Yeah, but those are the 2 front of the room subs. He's got 2 more at the back of the room.
At the back of the room, that's right. And these are all Prime speakers, aren't they? These are all...
no, his front speakers are SVS Ultra bookshelf and center.
Ultras, that's what I mean.
And then he's got the Prime Elevation speakers up on his wall.
Yeah. He's got some panels behind there and all kinds of good stuff.
Good stuff.
All right. Mitch with the carefully vacuumed carpet wanted to share the results of his completed home theater. He's got a JVC X770 projector ceiling mounted and firing onto his 120-inch silver ticket screen. He got professionally calibrated and feels it was well worth it. And he says it looks much better than it did before. He added an Emotiva XPA3 Gen 3 amp to his Marantz SR7011 AV receiver, and he installed 4 DefTech AW6500 speakers on the ceiling, giving him a 7.1.4 setup along with his 7 B&W 600 series speakers and Rhythmic FV15 sub. Where's the sub?
It is in the corner created by the 2 the rows of seats.
Oh, okay.
So he's got seats that are facing sideways and seats that are facing forward, and in the corner there is where the subwoofer lives.
Those are some big speakers on the ceiling, dude.
Yeah, and all weather, I believe, by the AW thing. So.
That's what it looks like. Yeah, it looks like those are outdoor speakers, but hey, I bet they sound just fine up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it works.
There you go. All right, let's get into these questions.
All right.
Infinite Gary. For those of you that don't know, when you get a nickname on this because of something about you, and Infinite Gary has an Infinite Baffle sub. If you want to know what that is, there's lots of articles on it. Gary wants us to play devil's advocate. Gary's not the boss of me. I'll do what I want. Which means I will definitely play devil's advocate. He knows we are big fans of butt kickers and bass shakers, and he isn't into them either. But the concept is still popular, and some commercial movie theaters even offer butt kicker brand tactile transducers. So it's not the full seat motion of D-Box, just the same seat shaking someone could install at home. Mm-hmm. So what's the appeal? In what situation would this actually be something we would want and approve of? Me? Nothing. Never. Never.
Really? You'd never consider a tactile transducer.
I cannot think of a situation where I would.
Okay.
I can think of situations where I will approve of other people having them.
Okay.
I will never. They live in an apartment. Mm-hmm. And they can't have a real loud sub that will actually shake their room, and they want to feel some bass.
Yep.
I've had people who like have to whisper in their apartments after like 8 p.m. or their neighbors will call the cops on them.
Yep.
So something like that, I think or they're using headphones and they still want to get a little bit of that sense of movement. I could be okay with that.
I would suggest them to the people who are like car audio people and they want that same ridiculous tactile thump at home, which unless you have a really small room and some really big subs and don't mind bursting your eardrums, you're just not going to be able to recreate that. But a butt kicker could do that for you. It's not an experience I would want, but that's what some people want, is that crazy level of bass that you can do similar to car audio. So that could be an application I could see for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, Ryan on Facebook posted, he said, Blade Runner 2049 in Dolby Cinema is pretty great, but almost ruined by tactile transducers. I do not get the point of the transducers. I do get the point of the transducers, but the levels were just way overblown. I don't need an earthquake every time a car moves. And to go back to this idea that why would they install these into a theater when it's the same thing you get at home, the reality is they will do anything that they think that will get them some more money.
Oh yeah.
And there are people right now that exist in real life who are actively searching out theaters with D-box seats because they like them the best.
Absolutely.
I don't know who those people are.
I mean, the butt kicker style, or Clark Synthesis, or even just the Aura bass shakers, they're not D-box. I mean, D-box is a fully actuated 3-axis moving seat. It's considerably different from simply replicating what's in the LFE channel from a tactile transducer versus a transducer that actually turns the electricity into sound. This is turning it into physical movement, but it's just more or less vibrating your chair at the frequency that's playing from the subwoofers. So, I'm a much bigger fan of having an enclosed room, subwoofers capable of pressurizing that room and getting my tactile sensation that way. But I could perhaps see the application for tactile. I would have them quite subtle, but perhaps in some of these great room situations that we have quite a few people writing in, they've got 10,000 or more cubic feet. They're not going to be able to pressurize that. Right. I could see a fairly subtle use of a tactile transducer. That's a lot of money for a subtle effect, but I could see enjoying it myself in that application. That's a maybe for me.
No.
He said devil's advocate. I'm playing devil's advocate.
I can't do it. He asks, why is it almost all home theater recliners have such tall seat backs that come up behind your head? Isn't this too high? Doesn't it block the sound coming from your surround and surround back speakers? Dude, don't be sizist. There's taller people than you. They need to have that taller seat.
But that's exactly why it is called a headrest, because your head is supposed to rest on it.
Yes. And I'm 5'7", all right? I am a short dude. There's like super tall people like Austin, right? Austin's this lumbering giant of a man who goes, I mean, he probably is like, has to put his hands back here or his head will just like fall off the back of the couch. It's just Austin. He's a very tall man. So, there's that, but your head's supposed to. And doesn't it block? Yeah, it does block the sound. It does. Yeah. You're right.
I mean, Gene from Audioholics opted for a specific model from Continental Seating that does have a headrest, but they made it quite narrow at the top so that it isn't much wider than the width of a human head for the actual headrest part, in an attempt to block as little sound from behind and beside him as possible. That's one other option. I mean, to me, it's just because when people buy recliners, they expect to be able to recline in them and have their head be supported. So this is what customers expect from us, as opposed to we're designing this for the utmost in audio performance.
That'd be mesh. It'd be like one of those mesh desk chairs is what you're looking for.
Right.
Or those, like if you've ever seen like a really high end with those $250,000, $750,000 speakers and everything else, there's usually one little wooden chair with planks in it, and that's
with a
it.
low back. There's nothing physically supporting your head yet.
No
you
pillows.
Could go for what are those it's almost like a dentist chair head support. Like it comes up on a stalk. And has just a
like
small
a car
head
seat.
support.
Car seat has those. Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah, like that. There's that option, or just
down.
going for the low back, like a European style chair that would have a low back, like what Ecornes makes or something like that.
Or you could just recline your chair, and then your head, your thing is gone down, and your head is now a little bit more in line with your speakers, and just stay reclined all the time. I know you'll have to suffer the indignity of relaxing while watching a movie, but I think it'll be worth it for the better sound.
But this is also the reason why we mentioned that we still favor elevating your surround back speakers enough that they have a clear line of sight to you. And if you have a taller seat back, they're going to have to be elevated that much more to give you a clear line of sight. So that's where that advice has largely been coming from. Yeah.
I like the name of the pod. I just named the podcast. I had to do that real quick.
Okay.
I know I had to do that real quick because it was hilarious. All right, Gary has noticed several discs where there's a Dolby Audio logo on the back of the box, but the movie includes a DTS HD Master Audio soundtrack. Why is a Dolby Audio logo there if it's DTS Audio? I'm guessing it's because at some point during the making of this movie they used Dolby mastering, or there could be some other Dolby function that's in here, but I don't think that the final product has to have Dolby True HD.
No.
Just because they use
the Dolby logo. I'm figuring if you look at the Spanish language track or the French language track, that's probably Dolby Digital.
Yeah.
Or the special features are probably Dolby Digital. So there is Dolby Audio on the disc. It's just not the main feature in English. That's all. Yeah. That's why I would imagine that's there.
So he has a dead-end DVD A1 Blu-ray player. He's found that on several discs. If he selects a bonus feature, for some reason the bonus feature won't play, and the movie itself plays instead. Mm-hmm. His Marantz Blu-ray player and his Oppo UDP 203. Dude has way too many players. Don't have this problem. Bonus features play fine. He's just curious why his Denon would fail to play the bonus features like this. Isn't that thing like a bajillion years old?
It was one of the earliest.
One of the first, right?
It was one of the earliest.
I guarantee you that's your problem right there.
Yeah, no bonus view. Remember bonus view? Remember Blu-ray bonus view?
That was that. I use that all the time, like exactly zero of the times.
But that's what I don't even remember what it was called. Remember how there was like a revision after the initial Blu-ray players that added like bonus view and support for BD Live copy protection, which wasn't even in the very original players. That type
BD
of craziness.
Live. It wasn't. I thought BD Live, they were able to send, like, if you were connected to the internet, you would get different previews based on what was the most recent movies and stuff like that. Like, this is the most useless thing I've ever downloaded onto my
They had the
device.
one cool thing, which was like they had a live broadcast where the director was commentating live as it was happening, but it just that went nowhere. So nowhere. It's such an early player that it lacks that bonus view support, and that's why some special features aren't going to play on that player.
Yeah.
Yep.
Michael used a Mac program called TT Dynamic Range Meter to analyze his music collection to see what songs have the biggest dynamic range. He also checked the dynamic range database where people have posted dynamic range ratings for many, many albums in various formats. CD, vinyl, download, SACD, all that. So, we've always said to use songs you know really well when evaluating and auditioning speakers. What about using some songs you aren't all that familiar with, but they offer lots of dynamic range? Well, I would get familiar with those songs.
That's right.
And then you'll be fine. Don't download them and then go to the store to start auditioning speakers. Download them, listen to them on your home theater a bunch,
or your headphones.
Some headphones. Listen to them in your car. Listen to them in a bunch of different situations so that you know them pretty well in all these different situations. Then go listen.
Having test material that includes a nice wide dynamic range is definitely something I consider worthwhile. And various sound systems will reproduce that dynamic range to varying degrees. Some, it'll really stand out, the dynamics, you'll be like, wow, that goes from really soft to really loud. That can be a function of the sensitivity of the speakers or the available wattage of the amplifiers that are driving them. That can be part of that. You also might notice the noise floor more in something that has a wider dynamic range. So yeah, I think it's totally worthwhile that some of your audition tracks do include a wide dynamic range. I don't think it's a necessity for all of them to contain that. Just like it's not a necessity for every audition track that you have to have tons of deep bass. You want a nice mix of audition tracks, some that have some really deep bass, some that have some great vocals that are almost isolated, some that have lots of layered instruments so you can try and tell if things are delineated from one another and you can follow one specific instrument like you could in real life if you were listening to a live performance. So you want a nice smattering of things, and having dynamic range is one of those.
And honestly, just being like, oh, I've heard this song 100 times, that's not good enough. That's not really good enough. When I was testing speakers all the time, I had like 5 songs I would use. And when I was doing speaker tests constantly, I could listen to the first 15 seconds of a song and I'd be like, okay, well, I know that about this speaker. Skip to the next song. Okay, know that about this speaker. I knew those songs so well that it's not just hearing the songs, it's really listening to them. You have to sit there and pay attention and listen. Try to hear things past, try to hear all these different things that Rob's talking about. Try to hear the instruments behind the instruments. Try to hear any extraneous sounds that are in the background. Try to hear how lifelike some of the instruments are sounding. Just having listened to the song multiple times is not good enough. You really have to pay attention, because if not, when you get in there to listen to this new speaker, you will be paying attention because you're trying to hear this new speaker. And if you haven't done that at home, you're going to be like, this speaker's amazing. And then you take it home and you're like, well, I don't really think it's all that great. I don't know why I thought that. Well, this is why. So really get to know your music. He asks, is the TT Dynamic Range Meter program a genuinely useful tool for him, and is Dynamic Range Database a good resource for him to find songs to add to his speaker audition playlist? Sure. I have no problems with it. I don't think that you have to, you're like, oh, well, I really like this song, and I really know a lot about this song, but it doesn't have a great dynamic range, so I can't use it. That's not the case.
I say, that'll just be one of the parameters that that particular song isn't good for, but it might be good for something else. Right.
So a couple of tracks in particular caught his eye. One is called Egg Fry Number 2. I don't know what happened to the first egg fry, but maybe they broke the yolk. It's 15 minutes, 25 seconds long, and it's just a recording of an egg frying in a pan. It has the highest dynamic range rating in the entire database. Another track is called 1 Minute of Silence, and it's 1 minute of silence. So it's silence. But both the TT Dynamic Range Meter program and the database have it rated as having very high dynamic range. How can there be a lot of dynamic range on a track that is silent? Is he missing something? Well, okay. If you're looking for noise floor, having 1 minute of silence is a way you can do it. Just play that and then turn it up. Just keep turning it up until you hear something. And if you never hear anything, you're like, well, that is the noise floor I'm looking for. 0. If there's something going on with that speaker or with the amp or whatever that you're looking at, that's one way to do it. Now, the egg frying, that doesn't surprise me at all that it's going to have really high dynamic range, because there's going to be pretty quiet parts, and there's going to be parts where it pops.
Yep.
And those pops are going to be way up there, know, the difference. And that's what they're looking at, the difference between the softest sounds and the loudest sounds. So
that's all the dynamic range is. It's literally the difference between the very loudest thing in the track and the very quietest thing in the track. Now, why that 1 minute of silence would show up as having very high dynamic range, I'm betting you there's like a teeny tiny little pop at the very beginning or the very end.
Right.
Which might even be just an error in the track. But I'm betting that there's some stupid little pop in there that might be so fast and so high in frequency that you don't even hear it. But I'm betting you that it's probably a mastering error or something. That's why that showed up. But as long as there's something in there that's really,
gotta
really
be
loud,
but if the rest of it's silence,
and then the rest of it is silence,
is
that's
nothing.
a ton of dynamic range.
Yeah, it's a ton of dynamic range.
Yep.
So yes, what are our go-to songs and movies for auditioning speakers? I don't use movies for auditioning speakers except for subwoofers. There are some. I mean, I don't have particular ones. I'll watch movies when I'm auditioning speakers and pay attention to them. But I generally don't say, oh, well, this is really good. I do have some discs that have video associated with them, but they're all music discs. So the Blue Man Group, I've got a couple of those.
Yep.
I've got Diana Krall live in Rio. That's on Blu-ray. That's a great one.
Yeah.
I've got a couple other ones, but they're all music related.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So I don't really
Along
do.
those
What
lines,
movies do you do?
I use Chris Body in Boston, which is a recording of a concert, which has fantastic audio quality on there. So that's a
Porcupine
Blu-ray.
Tree too. I use that as well.
Which one?
Porcupine Tree.
Oh, Porcupine Tree, yeah. For
Anesthesia
movies, I do use the first Avengers, The Attack on New York, because it has a great moment where the sound pans all around you in a 360-degree circle. So for surround sound, that's a nice little show-off thing. I use The Dark Knight Rises, the opening, because it has that exceedingly subtle, it's not exactly a heartbeat, but it's reminiscent of a heartbeat, which on playback systems that can't reproduce it, you don't hear it at all. You don't even know that it's there. So it's cool to show it off. It's like, check that out. And I'll use, what else do I use for movies? I'll use Star Wars, and I actually like to show off Episode 3, which I know it's a prequel episode, but the music, the score in that episode is fantastic. The John Williams music is
I will
fantastic.
sometimes watch the beginning of Attack of the Clones because there's the part at the very beginning where the ship flies over the top of you.
Yeah.
That's got some great sound. I mean, so there's stuff that I use. Yeah. And for surround, sometimes Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock, when he gets out, his arms are going all over the place when they
that's right. Yeah, that horror scene. For music, I mean, I know it's super cliche, but Nora Jones's "Come Away with Me" is a fantastic album for auditioning.
Yeah, everybody uses that. I'm never
super
really a
cliche,
fan
but I mean, on that dynamic range database, it's one of the better tracks, one of the better releases in terms of that as well. I'll use I particularly use a song from Dido called "Stoned," because in that one the instruments keep layering on top. It's almost like a round where the more instruments keep coming in one after another. So that's a good delineation test. Can you follow the original instrument after like a dozen more instruments have come in one by one?
What's the one you used with the oboe?
John Williams. I was going to just mention.
Yeah.
So John Williams. I particularly like the Jurassic Park theme. To me, that's a fantastic track for audition, and it's really nice music to listen to too. But it's got a glockenspiel, it's got a bassoon. So those are a couple of instruments that you can really pick out in that mix. So
let's see. This is something that Rob shared with me. He shared with me this. He goes, "Oh yeah, this is great," and these instruments. Well, if you're not really familiar with those instruments and how they're supposed to sound in real life, it does you no good. So asking us what we use may not really help you. You may hear this and like Rob shared with me that track.
Yeah,
I know. Rob shared with me that track, and I was like, I don't know, dude. I don't know what I'm supposed to be hearing here. It sounds nice, I guess. Yep. But so I've got that Dr. Chesky's or whatever.
Dr. Chesky.
Yeah, that headphone thing. I use that sometimes for music. Yellow, the Eye. Yellow is the band that did the "Oh Yeah" song, right? It's terrible music. It's not pleasant to listen to. But there's just they're playing with phase in ways that most people don't play with phase, and they do it so overtly that you're just like, I just have to listen to this one part of the song and we'll see how wide your soundstage is. But I mean, that's all I have to do is listen to that one part. I have a disc that we put together for that $1,500 to $2,000 tower speaker shootout that we did years past. Everybody threw in some of their favorite songs. So I have clips of like 7 songs. I just throw that thing in there. See you later. Porcupine Tree, I've got a couple of their DVDs or SACDs. I don't remember which that I listened to. Oh crap! Where's my? Is it over there? It's probably over there. But I have like a thing that's all full of stuff, like just one specific CD case. What is the name of that singer? Moesha? No, Morchiba. I like her stuff. I like listening to her stuff. She has a lot of really good vocals as far as, very clear. The music is very, very clear, and it's pleasant enough to listen to. I can sit there and listen to it, and my wife will spend time with me while I do it. So that's some stuff.
Yeah.
That's some stuff.
That's a smattering.
Ryan on Facebook. So Ryan's room is 14 by 20 by 8. He'd like to start putting together an immersive audio setup, but buying a receiver, all 11 speakers, and 2 subwoofers at once is expensive.
Yeah, I hear you.
We know.
Yeah.
He's thinking of starting with 2.1 or 3.1 and expanding to the system over time. He's thinking his receiver will be the Denon AVRX 4300H.
So far, I like his ideas.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with his receiver choice to begin with, but we'll get to that in a second. And I know I have the receiver and I like it, but let's just say I don't necessarily agree with this receiver choice. So would he be better off to start with a pair of towers plus a sub, or a pair of bookshelf speakers plus a sub? Or is it critical to have a center speaker right away, meaning you should start with the 3.1? I think you should start with bookshelf speakers and a sub, and don't worry about the center right now.
Yeah, I am on board with that as well. There's a few reasons why. Number one, it's easier to audition bookshelf speakers than towers. I mean, just logistically, it's easier. If there is shipping, it's cheaper. They're cheaper to begin with. And once you upgrade, you might find, hey, these bookshelf speakers as my front, left, right, that is totally all I need. In which case you haven't overspent.
That is exactly what you're going to find. You have 14 by 20 by 8. You do not need tower speakers.
But in the event
let's just save money right now.
In the event that you do end up getting towers, maybe you just want them. Maybe you think, I would like something that can play even louder, or maybe I just like the looks of them, whatever it is. If you do end up getting towers in the future, those bookshelves that you already have can easily be repurposed as your surround speakers. So there's really very little downside in starting with the bookshelf speakers. And yeah, if you're the primary listener and you're going to be sitting centered between the left and right speakers, it is not critical to have a center speaker right away. You'll get a very nice phantom image. Now, the people sitting to the left and the right of you might not get as good a phantom center. So if that's a setup and it's super critical for you to have a locked center, then getting a center, I wouldn't say right away, but that would probably be your next purchase after you've decided what front, left, rights you want to have. Yeah.
So he's considering the Aperion Veris 2 Grands, the SVS Ultras, SVS Primes, and Ascend Sierra Raw speakers. What would be his best starting point? Whatever one that will send you for free, for free two-way shipping. Those are the ones you want to start with.
Is all of them except the Ascend Sierra Raw speakers.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you were to get just a pair of Sierra 2s, then you'd be out the shipping cost if those are the ones you end up sending back. But my honest answer is get all of those. Those are all really nice speakers. Get all of them, audition them, compare them, and because 3 out of the 4 of those can be shipped to you and sent back without you paying any shipping costs, it's a pretty low-risk venture to go ahead and get all of those and know for 100% certain that you're getting the ones that you like the best.
So, Ryan, the reason why I said I wasn't so sure about your AVR purchase is because right now, it sounds to me that we're on at least a year-long journey. Maybe more.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, well, then the 4300H is fine. If I'm not wrong, then I would recommend starting with a lower end receiver that you can spend less money on now, with the idea that once you get to the point where you start buying overhead speakers, that's when you'll buy your actual receiver. And then at that point you go on. So right now I think you should be looking at a 5.1 receiver, 7.1 receiver, something like that, and not and spend as little as you can on it at this time, if I'm right about that. Now, the X4300H is a great receiver right now. And there's
it's
no doubt about
that. Really attractive price at accessories.
It is. I understand that. But there's always, every year, there is a receiver that is at an attractive price. A couple of years ago, it was a 4,000. And we lived on that one. A couple of years later, right now it's the 3,300, 4,300, depending on what you really need out of life. But they are both really quite good receivers for their price points. So the question, I just think that that really your receiver should be your kind of last purchase, if that makes sense. So get what
Although
you need to
do
get by
need
for
one
it.
at the very beginning.
That's what I'm saying.
Otherwise,
You get one now that will do the minimum what you need, and then say to yourself, when I buy overhead speakers, I'm buying them all at the same time and a receiver.
Yeah, I can see the argument that, like, for example, the X3300W is down to $450 in accessories for less right now. That's crazy. However, of course, it tops out at 7 speakers maximum. So, yeah, gosh, I mean, it's $450 versus $700. Certainly, that's not nothing.
Dude, that's shipping plus, a couple of nice dinners for those.
Oh yeah.
Ascend speakers.
And it would, if you do end up sending back the Sierra 2 speakers, that would cover your.
But you hear what I'm saying, right? He's going to slowly get the speakers that go around him, and then he's going to get the overhead speakers. In this 20-foot deep room,
is, like,
he's probably going to want surround backs as well.
Let's say he got the X4300H right now, and that just lasts him, because it should really last him quite a while. So.
It should, but there's no guarantee.
Right? Yeah. That's a tricky one, Ryan. I think Tom's argument is well made. I can also see the value in getting an X4300H right now on the assumption that it will last you, because then total cumulative price will end up being lower. But I'll let you sort that one out for yourself, Ryan, because you're going to have to weigh how much budget you really do have right now.
Right.
And then
if you're going to be if you're slowly going to be buying these speakers over the next 6 months, go ahead and get the 4300.
Right.
But if it's going to be a year or more, I would consider getting something more stopgap for now.
Okay.
Jim has a Denon AVR X3300W. What's the difference between H and W now? HEOS built
Wi-Fi? In is where the H comes at the end. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Whatever. It offers many settings that can be adjusted. In Jim's case, he'd like to be able to goose the subwoofer output a little bit after having run Odyssey. If he goes to subwoofers and then manual setup, you can play a test on each channel one at a time and adjust the trim level. But there's another setting called audio, and under that menu there is a setting called subwoofer level, and you can turn that adjustment on or off. By default it is off, and when you turn it on, you get a scale from negative 12 dB up to plus 12 dB. The default is 0. There's a slider for subwoofer 1, the separate slider for subwoofer 2. So which one should you use? Do they do the same thing? If they do the same thing, why have the two different settings? Well, because at some point somebody said, a lot of people want to adjust their subwoofers, so maybe we should give them a way they can do that without having to go into the test tone part, because a lot of people won't do that. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I'm still not 100% on whether... Okay, so there's the speaker setup menu with the manual setup, and that the test tones play one at a time, and you adjust the trim level, and that for 100% sure, affects everything. Doesn't matter what listening mode you're using, doesn't matter what input you're going to. That is the subwoofer output level for the entire system. That's
what I would worry about with this subwoofer. That's the only thing I was concerned about as well, which is when you adjust it, are you adjusting it for the time that you're watching it right now? Are will it reset as soon as you turn it off?
Right.
I don't think it will. Or more likely is what I think will happen. It's for that input. I'm not 100%, but I'm fairly certain that under the audio settings menu, that is a input by input adjustment, similar to there's a video settings menu, which is input by input. It's independent per input. And I believe the audio menu is as well. So that would be the reason why because let's say you have one source device that for whatever reason the bass is always louder than all your other source devices. You could go into the audio settings menu and turn down the subwoofer level just for that input. That's what that is there for. So, if your idea is I just want to goose the subwoofer output level at all times, I would do that in the speaker settings menu by adjusting the trim level, because that is for certain universal across all listening modes and all inputs. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to disagree, but it sounds like you have more adjustment in, because I guess it depends on where your trim level is set. If your trim level is set -5, well, then you've got more adjustment in your trim level. But if your trim level is above 0, you got more adjustment in the subwoofer.
The subwoofer itself, like turn up its volume knob?
No, I'm talking about the subwoofer setting, the audio set within the audio subwoofer level thing. Because you got 12 dB that you can goose it up if you want to.
I suppose, but then it would be just for that one input, and then he'd have to do it on all.
I know, but how many inputs does he possibly have? I mean, I guess you could have lots, but realistically,
then there's another wrinkle in this, which is he could get the Odyssey editor app and manually adjust the target curve for his subwoofers and run Odyssey again with a new target curve setting.
That's what I would do.
Yet another wrinkle to this. For everyone in general, I suggest, if what you want to do is goose your subwoofer output level a bit, I suggest doing it in the speaker settings trim level, because that is just, now I have increased the signal level being sent to my subwoofers at all times, and that keeps it quite simple. For me, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Really? Isn't that what
I don't
you do,
like.
You
I know, but
I
don't like to change the trim levels. I like the trim levels to be pure. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather change it input by input, because I know I can go back to that input and just turn that off, and I know I'm getting whatever the flat is supposed to be or Odyssey is supposed to be. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If not, you're gonna have to remember. Okay, subwoofer 2 was on -7, subwoofer 1 was on -5, so now I have them wherever I have them. So
I can see that argument as well.
Yeah. Biv, this comes on Facebook. I'm resisting the urge to make the Bell Biv DeVoe joke. Biv has a pair of Sennheiser HG600 headphones. They're a bit difficult to drive, so he uses a monoprice desktop headphone amplifier. There's no link for this, and I wanted to see what this was, but
he didn't say the specific model of monoprice desktop headphone amp, so I'm not sure.
So late at night, he wanted to watch a movie without disturbing anybody, so he plugged in his headphones, his HD600s, into the headphone jack of his Denon AVR X4000. Yeah, I got one of those too. Sound played just fine, but there was severe lack of bass, which he knows isn't just the headphones themselves, because they can belt out some pretty good bass when there's a beefier headphone amp driving them. Mm-hmm. So is there a way he could connect his monoprice desktop headphone amp to his X4000 without blowing anything up? Zone 2?
Yep.
Or tape
Zone 2
monitor, right? Any of those?
I would use the Zone 2 pre-outs. That's the easiest, because those will be full range. You still have volume control on the AV receiver itself. Yep. If you're using your remote, and you can turn off the main zone while turning on Zone 2. So it gives you sort of independent control of a full range line level output that can feed your headphone amp. Yeah, Zone 2.
Right.
That's the solution. Now, the one caveat there is, whatever source you're then watching, you must set the source to output stereo audio. You must set the source to output 2-channel audio, because that's all Zone 2 on the X4000 can handle. So you can't send a surround sound signal of any type into your X4000, activate Zone 2, and have that surround sound source play out as Zone 2. It must be a 2-channel signal coming from the source. So that is the caveat to that, but it'll totally work.
All right. So he has a desktop set up with an analog integrated amplifier and a pair of speakers. He'd like to be able to connect his iPhone. Prices vary widely on DAC, so how much does he really need to spend to get decent sound?
Oh, so little.
Well, can't you just do this with the headphone out?
Yes, sure.
Just get a cable that splits it into RCA or whatever it needs to split it into.
So what you want is a 3.5 stereo 3.5 millimeter to stereo RCA adapter cable. You can grab an Amazon Basics version for $7. Totally
you
fine.
Monster! $7. What are these people made of money?
But that's with free shipping, because if you get the one from Monoprice, you have to pay shipping on the thing, and that ends up being just as much, if not more. So Amazon gives you the free shipping. Throw it in there while you're buying your eggs and underwear, and get yourself a 3.5 millimeter to...
Who buys eggs from Amazon?
I'm sure
Who
somebody
buys
does.
eggs?
They ship groceries these days.
Do they? They bought Whole Foods. Has that started the thing yet? Has that happened yet?
I don't know if it's totally taken over, but yeah, that's on its way. But if you have one of the newest iPhones that doesn't have a headphone jack, it still came with the little Lightning to headphone jack adapter pigtail thing in the box, and that's what you use. Is it the absolute cleanest signal coming out of the iPhone's built-in headphone jack that you can ever possibly imagine? No, but you asked for decent sound that'll play out of your analog integrated amp and your desktop speakers, and it's totally fine. I've used this exact setup of just an adapter cable coming out of the headphone jack in my iPhone. I've used that plenty of times, and it sounds totally fine.
Yeah, I've used it too. Yeah. That's what those front inputs are for on your receiver, so you can plug in your phone really
That's right.
easily.
Yeah, it sounds totally fine.
Gavin. Here's what Gavin wants. He wants a 55-inch smart TV with awesome picture quality, 4K resolution, HDR, HDMI, ARC, and all for under $800. Mm-hmm. And if the price could be even lower, so much the better.
Okay.
Well, not asking for much there. At the moment, he's leaning towards the Vizio M series or Samsung 7 series, but he's also thinking that Black Friday isn't terribly far away now, so perhaps forthcoming sale prices will bring a more expensive model within his budget. So what's the best TV he can get for his money? And what would Tom and Rob buy if they were in his shoes? I would buy last year's M series Vizio.
Oh, okay.
It's exactly the same as this year's M.
The 2017's got a bit brighter in the M series.
Well, that's just not that big of a deal for me. I live in a very dark room. How much brighter does it need to be? It's black in here all the time.
So I would myself probably go with a 2017 Vizio M series. That would be the M55 E0. That'd be the model. Now, that's got Chromecast built in. It's got a full suite of streaming apps built in, so that satisfies the smart TV thing. We know the HDMI ARC on that works well enough to get you Dolby Digital Plus bit streams out of its HDMI ARC, and it's not quite 1,000 nits, but it gets up over 800 nits for HDR, and it supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. He was already leaning that way. That's the one I would probably go with. Now, lots of people have reviewed the TCL, the 55P607.
Yeah, that's the one. That actually came to my mind. I didn't mention it, but I was thinking the TCLs because they're real cheap, aren't they? And they have Roku built in and everything.
It's got Roku built in. Also supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. Actually has more full array local dimming zones than the Vizio M series does. The one reason why I'm leaning a little bit towards the Vizio is, one, I don't know if the TCL's HDMI ARC port is outputting Dolby Digital Plus. I haven't seen anybody mention whether it is or it isn't, so I just don't know on that front. And the second is that it doesn't get as bright as the Vizio 2017 M series for HDR. It's more in the slightly under 600 nits range. So you really can't go wrong with either of those. They're both under $800 already. Those ones will probably get even cheaper on Black Friday because it's Vizio and TCL, and it wouldn't shock me at all for them to come down even cheaper. Either of those you really can't go wrong, but I'm leaning Vizio M series on this one. Now, for more expensive TVs, I'm like, if you want to keep Dolby Vision capability, you have to go pretty high up in the lineup. Like in Sony's lineup, it's the X930E, which is definitely not going to be under $800 even on a Black Friday sale. The X900E from Sony is a very nice television, but it does not support Dolby Vision and never will. So how important is Dolby Vision to you? Because the X900E might come down to under $800. Maybe. That's pushing it, I think. But honestly, I'd grab that Vizio. That's what I'd do.
Bill. Back in 2015, Bill built his second dedicated home theater. He detailed his journey from planning to completion in the AVS forum thread, which I'm sure was only about 5 or 6 posts long, because that's the way AVS works.
It's really impressive. I mean, he put up his plans. He showed putting in the equipment closet for this thing. He tore everything down basically to the studs. Complete wiring. Spent a lot of time planning the HVAC and put in lighting and a soffit and everything. And the end results, I think, look fantastic. You know, he built columns, put in acoustic treatments, really wired this thing up nicely. So, I mean, the end results that that we're showing in photos on YouTube there. That's a really nice looking theater.
He's got his projector on a shelf.
He's got his projector on a shelf at the back there. Yep.
When I moved my surround speakers, because I have those old Emotiva like on wall surrounds, and they have this plate that's flush. That was a nightmare to work with. It's just, it has keyhole mounts and stuff like that, and if your screws are just a little bit too loose, it'll rattle.
Yep.
Used to drive me absolutely bonkers. So I ended up, like, the last minute, I ran down to Home Depot or to Lowe's, bought myself like a 6-inch thick 6-inch wide 1-inch thick board, and sliced up 15. Like the speakers themselves are 13 inches long.
Okay.
Wide. And I made 15-inch shelves, 15.5-inch shelves. That was just enough for the brackets and for them. That was all there was for it. And they just these little perfect little shelves for them. Took me like 15 minutes to make them. Painted them and everything. Put them up there before the paint was dry. Put a shelf liner on top of it so that the speakers won't rattle. And now I can get behind my speakers. Oh, another fun fact of how much of an idiot Tom was. I don't know if this is they have switches on the back.
Yes.
One of them was dipole, and one of them was set bipole, one of them was set dipole. Or as I took it off the wall, I hit one of the switches.
Maybe.
More likely it was that second one, because why would I have not set both of them for bipole? I mean, bipole, yes, bipole. But I don't know. Anyways, yes, his theater looks very good. So let me continue on with this. Fast forward today, he has sold that house, is now in the process of building a custom home theater from the ground up again. He will, of course, include his third dedicated theater, but
he's building a whole custom home.
Oh, this is the whole home?
The entire house. He's building the entire house from the ground up.
Wow. Yeah. Dude, I am proud of myself that I made 2 shelves. Okay? That's the gap here. So please, just keep that in mind when you ask us questions. He will, of course, include his third dedicated theater, but he is working with a completely blank slate. He doesn't have any constraints of a pre-existing room or floor plan, so it's almost overwhelming in terms of choice and option. He'd like to pick our brains over the next few months to add to his ideas, and help him nail down some plans. Dimensions of the room. He's thinking of something close to 15 feet wide by 23 feet long by 10 feet high, but now it's time to make changes to this plans if he's going to do so. So any thoughts we might have about the finished dimensions would be welcome. Do you want me to read the rest of this?
That's all part of A there, yeah.
So he's envisioning 2 main rows of seats, likely 4 recliners across each. He'd also like an overflow row at the back, at the very, very back, but since it would only be used occasionally, it'd be fine if the overflow row is close to the back wall and doesn't recline. While he's putting, by close if you mean on it, I agree. While he's putting good money into his home build in his theater project, he isn't looking to go nuts. A wobble K projector and perhaps Sony's least expensive genuine 4K projector. It's the sort of display he's planning for, so we have a rough idea of the sort of light output and throw distance that he has in mind. So dimensions of the room, screen size, and seating distances, what would we advise? Okay. So there is the perfect ratio, right, of rooms for acoustics.
Yep.
If you were building a room, I would do that for sure, because I mean, in this case,
if you can, it's the height that gets a little tricky, because basically if you stick to prime numbers, everything acoustically works out super well. So if you made it 11 feet tall, 17 feet wide, and 23 feet long, all prime numbers, you get like the lowest number of standing waves possible in a rectangular room. Now, that sounds like maybe it's a possibility. That's not that far off from what he was suggesting. Right. But that height is the question mark. Can you have a finished dimension of 11 feet tall, especially since one of the things I'm really going to suggest to you is having a drop ceiling. And a drop ceiling doesn't have to have a ton of space above it, but normally you'd leave a minimum. I mean, the minimum you're allowed to leave in a drop ceiling is 4 inches, but you'd want at least 6. That's almost unusable if you're running any ducting up there. So typically 8 or a foot. 8 inches or a foot is what you leave.
So you're really asking them to have 12-foot ceilings.
That's, essentially I'm asking, to have 12-foot construction and then have a 1-foot drop ceiling, leaving you internal dimensions of 11 feet high. Now that, to me, isn't super necessary, because if you do end up with internal dimensions of 10 or 9 feet high, it doesn't mess things up that much at all.
Yeah, so 17 by 23, if you can get that, and then you're stuck with the 10, Well, then you're stuck
Yeah.
with the 10. It's close enough.
But
I'd be okay with that.
17 feet wide is really, really nice to have, especially when you want 4 recliners going across.
I don't think that. What does he say? He wanted 15?
He wanted 15.
I don't think 15's big enough for 4 seats.
I mean, unless these are, sharing arms or no arms, like it's a love seat with 2 recliners on either side with shared arms between the love seat
Not
and the
if you're going to have
recliners.
I mean, if you're going to have a dedicated theater, they got to be aisles on either side.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically, you need aisles on either side.
I mean, you don't have to. You could have an aisle just on one side, but I mean, this is like, okay. So I mean, we're dealing with essentially dream theater, like dream theater with not an unlimited budget. We want to keep it somewhat reasonable, but if you literally have complete freedom over the dimensions of this room, going from 15 feet wide to 17 feet wide to me doesn't seem like crazy town, right? We're talking about getting it to 17 feet wide instead of 15. I think that's probably doable. So I would do that. If you can end up with the internal height being 11 feet, acoustically, that's like super duper ideal. But that is essentially asking you to make the room 12 feet tall and then have a 1 foot drop ceiling. Because I really want you to have a drop ceiling.
Right. And to make your life a little bit easier.
Oh, sure. Does it ever?
So screen size, if he's 23 feet, his primary rows of seat are either going to be a third of the way into the room or 2/3 of the way into the room, depending on which direction you're coming from. So either a third from the back or a third from the front.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's where your primary row is going to be, one of those two, right? I mean, acoustically, that's where you want to put them. You don't want to put them smack dab in the middle.
Oh, certainly not in the middle, no.
So, my idea would be that you would have a row of seats, like you'd have a front row, your second row is your primary row.
Oh, okay.
And then your back row. That way you can have a row that's a little bit closer, that's going to have their screen's going to be big for them, and acoustically they may be closer to the middle of the room. Your third row is just your trash row anyways. But your middle row is the one that is really for you. And you're going to be on top of a right.
Yeah, I had a slightly different way of coming at this, which I was starting with the screen size. Because I want this screen to be 10 feet wide, which basically works out, 137 inches diagonal, but I'm going to suggest that you get your screen from Seymour AV, and they just go in even foot widths. So they have a 10-foot wide screen, which I think is 137 inches diagonal. Now, that's the screen I would suggest for multiple reasons. One, it actually suits this room size really nicely. Second, it works out really nicely for even 3 rows of seating. And perhaps most of all, you already said you want like a JVC Wobble K projector or maybe one of the Sony Genuine 4Ks. And 135 is about the largest screen size I would recommend for those so that you have nice looking HDR. Because if you go larger than that, it starts getting too dim. So I was like, okay, you go with this 10-foot wide screen, and you sit 12 feet away from it for your primary row when you're watching, CinemaScope movies and IMAX features.
That's basically that's almost exactly in the middle of the room, though.
But it's going to be an acoustically transparent screen, so he's going to have a false wall, which moves it, I'm going to say, 2 feet into the room.
Okay, so now he's 14 feet. Okay, that's a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, so now you're at 14 feet from the actual front wall. It looks like 12 feet to the screen, because there's a false wall there with 2 feet behind it. And then your second row is 5.5 or 6 feet behind that. And then I would just go ahead and put in like actual theater style seats for that very back row. So then you only need, 3.5, 4 feet from that very back row to the second row. And one reason I think that works especially nicely is that when you're watching just regular HD TV, you go and you sit in your second row because that gives you a 32-degree field of view and your front row gives you a 45-degree field of view. So instead of having 2 screens or crazy expensive motorized masking, you do the much easier thing of just moving yourself to the second row when you want the smaller field of view. Because the majority of the time, I'm betting it's going to be him and his family in here, and he's probably the only one who really cares about viewing angles and all that stuff. So I'm like, why go to the crazy expense of, dual screens or crazy expensive masking or whatever? If you want CinemaScope to be masked off, Seymour AV has their manual masking system.
Yeah.
But I'm like, get yourself a 16:9 screen that's 10 feet wide, front row 12 feet, second row 5.5 or 6 feet away. For CinemaScope, sit in the front. For HDTV, sit in the second row. And then that
That's only 3 feet
over.
behind that second row, though. The third row is 3 feet behind the second row if it's 23 foot.
Yeah, so that's why, like, so his second question was basically all about, or it might not be the second question, but when he was asking about acoustically transparent screen and how much room he needs behind that false wall, and whether that affects the dimensions of the room. If you do leave the 2 feet behind the acoustically transparent screen, you might want to consider going to 24 feet long instead of 23 for the actual physical dimensions, just for that overflow very back row. If you go with on-wall speakers, though, then you don't need the full 2 feet behind the screen. If you go with on-wall speakers, you could go down to a foot or a foot and a half. So, I mean, he's done extensive planning before, but this is the sort of thing I'm looking at. I mean, the other option is if you want to stick with 23 feet and you still want to have 2 feet behind the screen, you could go to a slightly smaller screen size and sit slightly closer to it. Whatever you need to do to nudge the seats exactly where they need to be. But overall, I'm like 12 feet from a 10-foot wide screen looks really, really nice. So that's my suggestion there.
So he said he isn't necessarily looking for specific speaker choices right now. But much like his general idea of what he wants for the projector, he wants to formulate a general notion of what speaker placement and configuration will be. Mm-hmm. Until now, he's always said 5.1 and 5.2. He's never used an acoustically transparent screen before. We're going to fix that. So in general, how much room should he leave behind his false wall, and how might that impact the dimensions of a theater plans? Should he be thinking towers, bookshelf speakers, in walls or on walls? And if he wants Atmos, what should his configuration be? 5.2.4, 7.2.4. Yeah, so what Rob was just saying, you physically need enough room for the speakers behind the wall, whatever that is. And just think of this wall, it is just framing with fabric wrapped over it, the acoustically transparent fabric.
And you are going to be lining that whole front wall with absorption. And it doesn't have to be pretty absorption, because it's all covered by the acoustically transparent screen and whatever black fabric you put around that screen. So the whole front wall can be covered in acoustics, in acoustic absorption, which, is very similar to like a THX baffle wall design, which means pretty much any speakers can be used up there.
Right.
He doesn't know exactly what speakers he wants to get. If you leave 2 feet behind the screen,
he'll have plenty of room.
Your choices are infinite. I mean, whatever speakers you want to use back there will work just fine as long as you basically line that.
You basically put your speakers up right up on the wall. Basically, they'll be very close to the wall, and then behind the wall okay, we're gonna get confusing here. So let's the speakers will be right, like firing. Their fronts will be almost touching the false wall. Behind them on the front wall, you will have lined that with absorption.
Yeah, like 4-inch thick absorption, yeah,
the whole wall, top to bottom. No one can see it anyways. All right,
that's right.
Then your acoustically transparent screen you have, you can put your you can just have 3 of the same speaker up front, wherever that might be. Yeah. On walls, in walls, doesn't matter. You choose, doesn't matter. Now, if you decide that you want something like the legacy audio ones that Ted has, then you can scoot this whole thing back.
That's
so
right.
that you basically are going to mount those things into your false wall.
Yeah, they're going to be mounted on the physical front wall, and then the false wall is going to be in front of that. But since they're already an on-wall speaker design, you don't need as much space behind that false wall.
So what I'm saying is he doesn't have to do that. He could actually mount them to the false wall, like the framing of the false wall.
The framing
if
of
you
the
wanted
false wall.
to. And then
you could do that too.
You could do it that so they're basically just right there. Doesn't really matter. I mean, think of it, that false wall is a speaker grill. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It is the speaker grill fabric. All right. So doesn't make any difference what speakers you choose. The only difference that'll change is where you can put your wall. So you need to listen to speakers, whatever they might be. There's tons of them out there. You have infinite choices. Okay. But
and it is a bit tricky. Like, for example, another choice would be JTR, which are high efficiency, compression loaded tweeters. Ugly as sin, but they're going behind a acoustically transparent screen, so who cares what they look like? Those might be a really nice choice. Now, in his email, he was like, he's maybe leaning towards bookshelf speakers. I want to warn you a little bit that in my idea, where you yourself might be spending quite a bit of time in your second row, just for regular HD TV watching or playing video games or something like that, now you've got yourself a distance of could be 18 feet from that screen.
Yeah, that's a lot for
most
bookshelf speakers.
And if you still want to be hitting full reference volume from 18 feet away, it starts to get a bit dicey for a lot of traditional bookshelf speakers. Now, if it's the JTR 8-inch, they would call it bookshelf, but it's not really a bookshelf by anyone else's standards. Or Power Sound Audio has something similar as well. If it's their high efficiency horn loaded or compression loaded speakers that are 95 or 98 dB efficient, absolutely that's going to work just fine. But if it's Ascend Acoustics and you were thinking Sierra 2s, I would hesitate to push those into service at potentially 18 feet away. I would push you towards their Horizon, which is essentially a big tower speaker, right, in a more compact form factor. So that's something to consider. I would suggest that your front three speakers be pretty darn capable in terms of output. This is a nice size theater. It's not gigantic, but it's pretty large, and you very well might be wanting to hit reference volume at 18 feet away from these speakers.
Which is another reason to move the speakers as close as you can to that false wall.
To the false wall, yeah. So overall, I'm thinking if you're planning on 2 feet behind that false wall, if you're planning on larger front speakers or high-efficiency front speakers, this is going to work pretty nicely for you as a general idea.
And in this size, I really see a 7.2.4 setup.
Oh, so do I. And I see multiple side surround speakers, at least 2 on each side for your surrounds.
I could get behind that. So you're going to wire those together, so that they're playing the same content, but you basically want them
wired in series. Wire them in series.
Right, but right next to your each row of seats, the 2 rows that matter.
Yeah,
front,
or maybe
the front and the middle,
slightly behind the front row, slightly behind the second row. Yeah.
The same way you would place them if there was only one set, basically.
And I wouldn't say that 4 subwoofers is out of the question. Because why not? I mean, this is Dream Theater territory. Why not make that entire seating area, even that crappy third row, have pretty darn uniform bass? You can't get more uniform.
You're already going to have... It's going to sound a lot better in there than you ever expected if you can get the dimensions the way we're saying.
Yeah.
Simply because of the lack of standing waves, or the reduced number of standing waves.
And I mean, a sub in each corner? Ooh, that's nice. And if you have 2 feet behind the false wall, you could put cylinders in the 2 front corners and they'll fit because they're only 16 inches diameter. It starts to shape up, doesn't it?
His first theater had an entry at the back. His second theater had an entry on its side. Both worked fine. We'd like to hear any thoughts we have about planning his entry into his third theater. Is there some sort of ideal layout? Fireman pole. With like a hatch that just slides open like Batman. You just slide into it. No,
I'm
just
thinking
me?
Entry on his back wall doesn't make sense in what he's proposing because you got a whole row of seats on that back wall. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but I mean,
can't be on your front wall because that's your screen.
It could be on the back wall as long as it's in one of the corners. But you're suggesting put a subwoofer in the corners.
I am.
I kind of
like
from the side kind of guy. I mean, if you don't have anything on the back wall, it's fine to put something in the back, but I find very few things as irritating as somebody opening a door at the back of the theater and light shining on my screen. I would rather have it come from the side. That's just me. Side. There's no ideal layout.
I think side entrance makes the most sense. And if you have this 12-foot distance between your front row and your screen, that's plenty of space to have a door somewhere in that range. So you can just walk into your theater, turn to your left or right, and there's all your seats on your risers going up. Yeah, I'd go side.
So his first theater had all of the gear and equipment in the theater. His second theater had an equipment closet just outside the theater. Now he has a chance to build an entire room if he wants to. Preferred to be able to store all of his discs outside the theater, but he's still trying to think of the most convenient way to be able to access physical media and put it into players and game systems and whatnot. So given his blank slate and being in the planning phase, what would we suggest in terms of where the equipment lives and where should he store his physical media and how can he conveniently access both from his theater? Have you heard of a NAS? You could do something with Plex. and get all your stuff on there.
But if it's Ultra HD discs and it's video game discs, you're not
ripping
those.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times you see in theaters, you'll see a glass cabinet thingy. You open it up and there's a couple of pieces of gear in there. It doesn't all have to be in there. It could just be the sources.
Yeah, just the things that you need to put discs into.
Yeah. I mean, his last one was so nice. I'm actually going to scroll back and look to it. His last one was so nice. There's a lot of options here as far as where he could place these things. I mean, you could put most of your gear behind that front wall. You could do that. I would.
Oh, I don't even think that's necessary. I have an idea.
No, what's your idea?
A lobby, a theater lobby, which is, a room that is just adjacent to your theater, your own separate room. Now that opens up the idea of airlock door system if you really want soundproofing. Double door system going from the lobby into the theater.
It's close like
because
that.
the last one he had in his theater build, he had an exterior door. That's what he used, exterior door with full weather stripping and everything. I'm like, the next step up from that is the airlock door. 2 doors.
It's a Star Trek theater.
Yeah, but I'm like, if you have a lobby and you basically have all your equipment accessible in that lobby area, and maybe you have a little seating area in there, popcorn machine, bar. I mean, I'm betting he's building a bar in this house.
Yeah.
I'm betting he's building a bar in this house.
I just want to warn, on some level, you can never have too much access to the back of your equipment. If you're the kind of person like I am, it is imperative that you consider, no matter where you put your equipment, that you can physically get behind it easily. Like me switching out the receiver, ginormous pain in my butt. Yep. Why? Because I have my stuff tucked in the corner to the side. Now, I could actually move it out, I think, and get more access to it now because I've moved some stuff out of the way. I've actually cleaned my theater up quite a bit. It's a disaster in here right now, but, whatever. But, you can never have too much access to the back of your equipment. So if you're going to put on a rack, make sure the whole rack comes out, boy. The whole rack comes out and spins around so that you can see the back of it.
If you're amenable to it, you can make the gear stack a feature of the lobby room. You can actually kind of like feature it, like build sort of like, how you have like a curved bar for the bar? Yeah. You can have like a curved feature that goes around the rack. So you like walk in as though you're walking behind a bar, but instead of a bar. So you would have a bar, but then in addition to a bar, you'd have another second thing that almost looks like a bar, but it's just gear back there. It's just a home theater equipment back there. I mean, you can make it a feature of the room.
Well, I mean, if you actually had a bar, let's just say you walk into this lobby. On the right side, as you walk in, there's a popcorn machine.
Yep.
Okay. Left side, there's a little seating area with a bar. So just like little stools in the bar. And then behind the bar, where you would normally see bottles of alcohol.
All your alcohol.
There's going to be, alcohol, but one's going to just be gear.
Could be, yeah.
Then you can actually walk behind.
Like a super fancy wine rack.
Yeah, and you can actually walk behind that wall that has that stuff and get to the back of your gear through a little closet back there.
Yeah.
Where then you can keep all of your physical discs or any other equipment.
Or you can have all your physical discs in the lobby as a display. Yeah. If you can have this lobby bar area, that opens up a ton of options. And then I would have like, a small flat panel in there so that you can queue up your movie or your game before you walk into the theater. Then you walk into the theater, hit play, and it's already all queued up. That's how I'd come at that.
So he went into a lot of detail with his previous theater builds, but he had constraints, which in a way made it easier for a lot of design. A lot of the design was about solving problems rather than having endless options. He has a plan for soundproofing. He intends to essentially construct a room within a room. As far as HVAC goes, the plan right now is for the theater to be on its own separate HVAC zone, so
I love
independent. That. I know, me too. Man. From the rest of the house. And believe me, if I ever upgrade if my AC ever goes out, I'm having a serious conversation with my wife about zones in this house.
Yeah.
And this room is a zone.
Yep.
It is a zone. And he's had experience with electrical planning before, so he's feeling very confident there. But he basically wants to know, what should he be asking about that he hasn't already asked, and he doesn't want to overlook something obvious. And right now, in the planning phase before construction has begun, is a time to make changes and think about these things. Well, you want to have at least a couple of 20 volt,
20 amp.
20 amp, lines run to wherever your equipment's going to be. I have no doubt that he has way more experience than I do as far as all this electrical and HVAC stuff. So if you haven't thought of it, I ain't going to be much help there. I
think he's pretty set on the electrical and HVAC. Having a separate HVAC zone, that's the cream of the crop. That's the Rolls Royce. So that's awesome. Lighting. He obviously has experience with installing this soffit lighting in his previous theater and that, but multiple zones of lighting, independent lighting zones within the theater. I'm not sure how much thought he's put into that before. The one that really sticks out in my mind is, do you want to start getting into voice control? Do you want to integrate a Google Assistant or She Who Shall Not Be Named from Amazon so I don't set off people's devices? If you want to start integrating that stuff, then that's just a consideration, right? What is your control platform going to be? Are you going to have an installer do Control 4 or Crestron or AMX for you? Do you want to get into simple remote so that you can do tablet control, or do you want to do tablet control via the Harmony system with a Harmony hub? Because it can do that, and that can integrate with these voice assistants as well, and that's all programmable by you. But some people want something that's even slicker than that, so they might be going.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. That voice control stuff has been very clunkily implemented in my experience. Trying to control your TV using She Who Shall Not Be Named is not easy. It's like you tell her to tell it to do something.
It's getting better on that front, though.
It's getting better, but it's still. My parents, who love their She Who Shall Not Be Named, still don't use it. Because it's too much.
It's not
and
completely
it works.
Reliable. Yeah.
It works when it works. Like I've had, hey, change it to this channel, and it will. But who can be bothered to remember what channel when all we really want to do is just, you don't want to sit there and have to say the name of the person, of the thing, and then say channel up. The same thing with me and making the volume adjustments. I'm like, I don't want to have to remember what volume level it is. So I'll say volume down or volume up. And if it's not right, I'll just walk over and press the volume button right there. But I think after Christmas this year, we're going to have about 4 of these in this house because all the boys want one.
But my number one piece of advice is have that drop ceiling and then have conduit raceways that might just go to a panel that leads to nowhere right now. Yeah. But essentially make your theater as upgradable as possible before the construction is complete, so that if you need to run a new wire from where your projector is mounted because you want to put an Echo device up there now or something like that, back into where it can connect to everything else in that lobby room or something like that, have those cable raceways, have those conduits already installed, and then you can seal them up for now if you're not using them. But if you need them, then they're already there inside the walls for the future. That would be the absolute number one thing I would be focused on.
All right. Chris. Last time we spoke to Chris, he was asking about connecting his gaming PC to his Marantz SR7010 receiver, Epson 5040 UP projector, and Oculus Rift VR headset. Our suggestions, whatever they were, because I don't remember, worked. Yay. And he is able to have an image on his projector with audio coming through his AV receiver via HDMI while simultaneously feeding his VR headset via the display port to HDMI adapter. Now he has an audio question. When he's playing Atmos content, his Marantz says Atmos. It's Dolby Atmos, of course, and everything works fine. But when he switches over to something else like web browsing or even just leaving the PC idle on his desktop, the front display of his Marantz will switch over to, say, multi-channel in 7.1. This wouldn't be a big deal, except his Marantz makes a clicking sound every time the listening mode changes, and there's a short dropout of the sound when the listening mode changes. That happens as well. Anyways, it's driving them a bit nuts. So is there a way to make it so the listening mode of this Marantz stays put? I don't. Is this a Marantz issue? Because I don't think it is. I think it's the PC, right?
That's right. Yeah. it's an issue in the sense that the Marantz makes this clicking sound and there's the momentary dropout while it gets the decoder, ready and that type of thing. But that's pretty much going to happen with any AV receiver you put into this system. And it's because the signal that's coming out of the PC is flopping back and forth. So he sent in images of basically all of his settings just going through what the Marantz properties show. The supported formats are Bitstream, it can do Dolby Digital Plus, DTS HD, Dolby True HD, all of that.
Yeah.
He's got his output volume peaked out as it should be. But one of the other settings that, not unique to this setup, but getting into some of the more advanced settings is that it does have this spatial surround processing option. We're seeing this now, like on the Xbox One, it has it as well, which is Windows Sonic or Dolby Atmos output. And what that is doing is the PC is upmixing everything to Windows Sonic or Dolby Atmos and then sending that out to the AV receiver. And that's basically having it use the Dolby Surround upmixer in the signal, and then that gets sent out as 7.1 PCM essentially. It's supposed to come out as a Dolby. It's supposed to come out as a Dolby Atmos bitstream in this case. That's what it's supposed to do. But really, the key here is that in his Windows sound settings, he must have set it for 7 speakers, which is why when the desktop is sitting there idle, it's flopping back and forth because when a little Windows chime goes off, right? That's just 2-channel PCM. But the PC is saying, well, you told me you have 7 speakers, so I'm initially going to send out a 7.1 PCM signal, but then you also told me to upmix everything to Atmos, so it tries to do that, but by the time the signal gets to the Marantz, the Marantz is going, what the heck are you sending me? So what I would do, this is what I would recommend. For your Windows sound settings, set it to 2 speakers. Tell it that you only have 2 speakers. Set it to 2 speakers, set them to 24-bit, 48 kilohertz, which is like the most basic audio, and have it just set for that. And then in the advanced settings, have exactly what you have, which is allow applications to take exclusive control of the audio output device. Because then if you're playing a game that has Dolby Atmos audio, you'll still get the Dolby Atmos bitstream from that source. If you use the Netflix Windows app and you want to watch Netflix that way, it'll still take control and send out the Dolby Digital Plus bitstream. But for all the other little Windows chimes and everything, that'll just be 2-channel PCM. Which means your Marantz can then upmix it if you want it to, right? It can upmix the stereo signal using the Dolby Surround upmixer, but it's not having this weird thing of bouncing back and forth between 7.1 PCM and the PC trying to upmix it to Atmos and a whole bunch of stuff that's causing all this flopping back and forth of the audio. So for Windows sounds, 2-channel, and then allow your applications to take control so that when it's actually an Atmos bitstream, you get the bitstream. When it's actually a Dolby Digital Plus bitstream, you get the bitstream. That's how I do it.
This question is so long. Are you kidding me? Why is it so long? Have you seen all the words? Shut up.
I wrote them, so yes.
I should bring, a drink in here. I said I wasn't feeling good, and I'm not feeling any better right now. All right. Kevin picked up a pair of Yamaha tower speakers from a thrift shop for $65. They were flagship speakers in the Yamaha's lineup back in the late 90s, so he's hoping for some pretty darn good sound. Each tower has a 15-inch woofer mounted on the side of the cabinet, and they're 4-way design. He was extremely disappointed with their sound. He could clearly hear vocals, even female vocals, coming from the 15-inch drivers, and those sounds were bouncing all around the room, creating a smeared and awful soundstage. The speakers can be bi-amped, with the lower binding post feeding only the 15-inch woofers, so he tried simply disconnecting them entirely, but then the speakers sounded extremely thin, with no lower mid-range. He did some research and discovered that the 4-way crossover had the tweeters playing from 7 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, the first 6.5-inch driver playing from 4 kilohertz to 7 kilohertz. Again?
That's
Anyways,
weird.
The second 6.5-inch driver playing from 850 hertz up to 4 kilohertz. Okay, and the 15-inch woofer playing everything below 850. Why would Yamaha have designed the crossover, the speaker this way? Even if they didn't predict the horrible results, they shouldn't have. Shouldn't they have just simply heard the issues once they built them? Now, first, okay, let's just stop right there. The late 90s, really? I'm looking at these speakers.
Mm-hmm.
They do look like something that came out of the late 90s, I gotta be honest with you. They also don't look like something that maybe Yamaha built in-house, that maybe they were. And this was actually the RBH made quite a few speakers that have these side-firing woofers. That's not an unusual design, and
there's plenty of speakers that
can be implemented pretty well. Now, why were what was the first 6.5-inch driver playing half of what
from 4 to 7?
Yeah, why was it doing that? Clearly, there's tweeter breaking up at some. I guess that's about the only thing I can think of is that the tweeter.
Yeah, I mean the tweeter's only going down to 7 to 20 for the tweeter, and then 4 to 7 for a 6.5-inch driver, which seems too wide for that frequency range.
It does.
Like physically, like the 6.5-inch diameter is physically too wide for frequencies that high. Strange choice.
So this is all very odd, and I'm not going to say that you're not right in what you heard and what you're saying, and I can say that the 90s were a strange time, and I can also say that not all speakers are made equally, and it's possible that Yamaha didn't even make these speakers. This could have, I mean, you did say they were flagships, but
yeah,
I'm having a hard time imagining what a flagship Yamaha speaker looks like. So. Clearly it looks like this, which is a problem, but maybe that's why they don't make them anymore. Yeah, they should have heard the results, but remember at this time, Bose was like the name, the name of the game.
Yeah, whatever you're comparing to that.
So it's very hard for me to look at to judge these speakers too harshly on their own merits when they were like getting their butts kicked by Bose. So. You know, maybe they were going for some reflected sound. You know, they wanted a little bit of that sound to be coming out the side.
I mean, you'd have like really directional upper mid range and lower treble, like really directional lower treble, and then like super wide upper bass and lower mid. Like, yeah, it's a weird design, man. It's a weird design. It's not where I would put the crossovers.
So for his part, Kevin decided to make his own crossover. He used car audio parts to make a simple two-way crossover at 5 kilohertz. So now the tweeter plays from 5 kilohertz up to 20 kilohertz. Both 6.5-inch drivers play from 80 to 5 kilohertz. And he tried using the subwoofer output of his AV receiver to feed the stereo amp, which then powered the 15-inch drivers as subwoofers from 80 hertz on down. This resulted in bass that was not uniform throughout the room. So yeah, that's what we're always saying on this podcast about the best placement for your speakers not being the best placement for your subwoofers, and that held true in this case, in all cases, but in this case in particular. But he combined the two towers with a separate 15-inch woofer subwoofer at the back of the room. That helped even out the bass considerably. So the results sounded way better than the towers on their own. So if he can improve the sound this much with his homemade crossover, what was Yamaha thinking? So much cocaine in the 90s. Just so much is what they were thinking. I don't know what they were thinking.
No, I mean, I have to agree with you. This is a bizarre crossover design. It's bizarre choices for a 6.5-inch driver to play from 4 to 7 kilohertz. It's crazy to have a 15-inch woofer being the only thing playing all the way up to 850 hertz. Yeah, these are bizarre choices. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, maybe somebody just, I don't know. What is there some like mathematical algorithm that would explain these like where they divided these?
I don't know. I gotta believe it's because they were having driver issues. That tweeter. I just don't know. I don't know what the thought process was there. I can't imagine what they were going for, but they did, and they did. Well, good job on fixing those speakers, by the way. Congratulations, and
I'll bet they sound better that way. I
would say let Yamaha know that you did this, and say, hey, if you guys ever need me to fix one of your speakers, I am $20 million an hour, and it will take me less than 1 hour to fix your speakers, because clearly your problem is nobody over there knows how to design crossovers. But good luck with that.
I think things have improved.
Ted, Ted came across the Illuminize sound wall. Illuminize sound, which is one word. Sound wall, which is the second word. An image is printed on a piece of aluminum and distributed mode loudspeaker exciters are attached to the back of the aluminum so that the entire picture becomes a wide dispersion speaker. You control it with an app, and the frame has a Raspberry Pi built in, along with some LED lights, motion sensor, and even a subwoofer output jack. Could these possibly sound any good, he asks. Is this similar to what Sony is doing with their A1 OLED to turn their entire OLED screen into speakers? Well, I mean, clearly that's... If it's not this exact, I'm sure it's not this exact thing, but it is that's how you turn a screen into a speaker, is by vibrating the screen. So
yeah, in Sony's case, they're small arm-like actuators, and these, just going by the images that they had on their website, and that kind of look more like voice coils.
But
I mean, it's certainly the overall, like, what would you call it? Idea is similar in that you are physically vibrating the entire front panel to turn that into one big surface that joins the air and creates sound. So that's similar. I think the specifics of how they're doing it appear to be different. It looks like they're using voice coils, whereas Sony is using actuators.
And just remember, I mean, there's only, what we were just looking at a speaker with drivers crossed over weird. There's zero crossover here.
Zero crossover.
Everything is that picture is trying to make all of the sound. You know how well that's going to work? Zero well is how much it's going to work. You will hear stuff. No doubt about that. It will be things you recognize. Also, no doubt about that. It's going to be smack dab in the middle of the mid-range, where all,
But because you got a big surface area, it doesn't have to move back and forth nearly as much for all that mid-range and treble. It barely has to move for that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it. I mean, could these sound any good? Yeah, it could. It could. I mean, the Sony ones on their A1 OLEDs, it sounds pretty okay. So it could. I don't know if it does. No idea if it does.
Are we on the last two questions? We are, and they're very short, and we've got 3 minutes. Let's go. Tony was a little bit surprised to hear our praise for some older amplifiers. I don't remember doing that. But anyways, he's planning to power his LCR speakers with an external amp while letting his Denon X4300H power the rest. If older used amps are an option, he might be able to save some money. So what are some older amps that we think are good in linear?
Man, there are a lot.
There's just so many. Really anything Emotiva has probably ever made. I mean, heck. Most of the amps that are out there, Bryson, the old amp, ATI, Rotel. Every time I say Rotel, I think of cheese dip. Rotel.
B&K,
right?
Which was made by ATI at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, ATI was the OEM for a ton, as was. What was it? Well, not Emotiva, but was Jade Audio, right? Their parent company.
Yeah.
They were secretly behind a ton of amplifiers, so a huge number.
Not all that secret.
Either Jade or ATI. But I mean, like anything Parasound has made.
Parasound,
would be very nice. Sunfire.
NAD.
Sunfire has NAD. Yep. Well, NAD isn't super linear.
Yeah, but the older stuff I think is better than the newer stuff. They hate me so much.
But there's Adcom had some very nice the old Crown stuff, the Lexicon stuff.
Oh god,
Lexicon which was made by ATI.
Yeah. There's a lot of it out there. So
there are a ton. I mean, honestly, if you know what you can do if you're going to a pawn shop or secondhand store or whatever, you can tweet me. You can tweet me and be like, "Hey, here's an amp I found. Here's a 5-channel amp I found. Is this any good?" It's $60.
You could probably just Google it right there and skip the middleman and just say, just look for a review that has anything regarding its linearity and measurements. If you can find something, you're probably golden.
But I mean, a good Class AB solid state amp.
Stay away from
There's no reason
ice
that should
or
ever not
digital.
be good.
That's right. They should all be good. I mean, they really should. There's very few ones out there that weren't. A Class AB amp, that's a mature technology. It's been around for a long time. We kind of pretty much got that one down. I think you could be pretty okay. So, yes, there's nothing wrong with any of
there's like the Anthem amplifiers, right? They're all very nice.
Basically all of them. All right, let's go. We've only got... Oh, we missed our deadline. 3 minutes. We couldn't answer 2 questions in 3 minutes. Dave, what is the best possible connection type for a subwoofer? RCA, XLR, wireless, ... I think those are basically the only 3. The one that makes the sound go to the thing. That's the one. Whichever one makes the sound go to the thing is the one that's the best. There is no best. There's just if it gets sound. Now, if your subwoofer is physically 200 feet away from the source of where it is, then XLR. Okay, but otherwise, I think wireless is the questionable one. RCA or XLR, any physical connection, thumbs up in the AVRant.
Yeah. Even wireless is going to be fine. Like, there are the people who were like, oh, all the wireless systems are only 48 kilohertz and 16-bit. I'm like, you're playing only up to 80 hertz.
It's like, how many bits do you need for...
Are you worried about 96 kilohertz sampling rate when all you're playing up to is 160 hertz at the most? I mean, give me a break. So that kind of nonsense. If you got a super long, and I'm talking over 100 feet distance, I don't know why that would be the case. Then you want an XLR cable, but otherwise there's no effective difference. Just whatever gets the sound to the sub is gonna you can't tell 80 hertz down. It's not gonna make a difference.
All right, well, that's it. Let's go ahead and thank our listeners of the week. We're going to thank Robert for his donation. He went to www.avrant.com and left us a little money on our buy us a cup of coffee link. It's a PayPal donation. So thank you, Robert, for that.
Yeah, Robert's so nice. He donated twice. Thank you.
Thank you. And then thank all of our patrons over at Patreon. Yeah. We are up to 26 as of the time of this recording. Thank all you guys. We also want to thank Byron and Tony for talking us out to SVS and to, I guess, Accessories for Less and SVS again. Thank you, Patreons, Byron and Tony.
Yeah. To all the patrons, thanks so much. Love seeing that number continue to go up. Hope it keeps going up. That'd be awesome. Byron, congrats on getting those SVSs fixed in a timely fashion. Thanks for talking us up there. And Tony, congrats on your purchases. Some really nice stuff. Stuff I would buy myself, for sure.
Sounds good. Me too, actually. Me too.
Thanks.
Me 3. All right. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.